June 22, 1941, 3:15 a.m. Along a 1,000-mile front from the Baltic to the Black Sea, 3 million German soldiers begin the largest military invasion in history, Operation Barbarossa, the attack on the Soviet Union. Among them is Gefreiter Hans Schmidt, a 22-year-old infantryman from Bavaria. He's part of Army Group Center, advancing toward Moscow. Hans and his comrades are confident. They've conquered Poland in weeks, France in 6 weeks, Yugoslavia in 11 days. The Wehrmacht seems invincible. Officers tell them the Soviet Union will collapse within 3 months. The Slavs can't fight, they're told. Their officers are incompetent. Their equipment is obsolete. We'll be home by Christmas. The initial advance seems to confirm this. Soviet forces are caught completely off guard. German mechanized columns race forward at stunning speed, encircling entire Soviet armies. Thousands of prisoners are captured daily. The soldiers joke about the Mongolian hordes fleeing before German steel. But Hans notices troubling signs from the very beginning. The roads aren't roads, they're dirt tracks that turn to mud at the first rain. The distances are vast, far greater than anything in Western Europe. And Soviet soldiers, while poorly led, fight with desperate ferocity. Even when surrounded, they don't surrender. They fight to the death. This should have been a warning. It wasn't. Within weeks, Hans's confidence begins to crack. His first real combat experience shatters the propaganda image of German invincibility. His company attacks a Soviet position near Smolensk. They expect the Soviets to retreat quickly. Instead, Soviet infantry holds the line with suicidal determination. German artillery pounds the position for an hour. When Hans's platoon advances, they expect to find corpses and white flags. Instead, they're met with withering machine gun fire from soldiers who should be dead or fleeing. The battle lasts all day. When the position finally falls, Hans sees why the Soviets fought so hard. They were chained to their weapons. Political officers had literally chained gunners to their posts with orders to fight to the death. Hans is horrified. What kind of enemy chains its own soldiers? But worse is the realization, if the Soviets are willing to chain men to weapons, they'll never surrender easily. This won't be over in 3 months. His company takes 50% casualties in that one battle. The survivors are replacements from Germany, boys who arrived yesterday, dead today. Hans learns the first rule of the Eastern Front: the life expectancy of a replacement is measured in days, sometimes hours. He's lucky to have survived the first month. Most don't make it that long. By August 1941, Hans's division has advanced over 500 kilometers into the Soviet Union. But Moscow is still 400 kilometers away. And every kilometer takes a toll. The distances in Russia are incomprehensible to German soldiers used to the compact battlefields of Western Europe. In France, you could march across the entire country in a few weeks. In Russia, you march for months and barely make a dent. Hans's feet are covered in blisters. His boots, excellent by European standards, fall apart on Russian roads. Supply trucks can't keep up with the advancing infantry. Food becomes irregular. Ammunition is rationed. Fuel for vehicles runs short. The division starts cannibalizing its own trucks to keep others running. Soldiers begin to realize, the Soviet Union is too big to conquer by simply marching forward. It's absorbing the Wehrmacht like a sponge absorbs water. Villages are hundreds of kilometers apart. When you capture one, there's just endless step to the next. The local population is hostile. Partisans attack supply columns. Wounded soldiers left in field hospitals are sometimes found murdered by civilians. Officers respond with brutal anti-partisan measures, burning villages, executing suspects, collective punishments. Hans witnesses these atrocities and says nothing. What can he say? If he objects, he'll be shot for defeatism. So he marches. And kills. And tries not to think about what he's becoming. October 1941. Hans's division is within sight of Moscow's suburbs. Officers say one more push will take the capital and end the war. But something ominous is happening, the weather is changing. The autumn rains begin. Dirt roads become impassable mud. Vehicles sink to their axles. Horses, yes, the mechanized Wehrmacht still relies heavily on horses, collapse in the mud and can't be recovered. The advance slows to a crawl. Then stops completely. The Rasputitsa, the Russian mud season, has arrived. Everything bogs down. Supply trucks can't move. Artillery can't be repositioned. Infantry sinks knee-deep with every step. And then, in early November, the temperature drops. The mud freezes. But the German army isn't prepared for cold weather. They were supposed to be home by now. Nobody packed winter uniforms. Hans is still wearing his standard summer uniform. At night, temperatures drop to -20 Celsius. Men begin to freeze to death in their foxholes. Frostbite becomes epidemic. Soldiers wrap their feet in newspapers and rags. They burn anything they can find for warmth. Some units have 50% casualties from cold before seeing combat. The officers keep saying winter uniforms are on the way. They're not. They're sitting in Warsaw, waiting for trains that can't move because Soviet partisans keep blowing up the tracks. Hans learns the second rule of the Eastern Front: Russia has two armies. The Red Army and General Winter. Both are unbeatable. December 1941. Temperatures drop to -40 Celsius. Hans has been on the Eastern Front for 6 months and has aged 10 years. His division is frozen in place outside Moscow. The Soviet counteroffensive has begun. Siberian divisions, fresh and equipped for winter warfare, attack German positions with overwhelming force. Hans's company is down to 30 men from the original 150. They huddle in a frozen bunker that provides minimal shelter. The cold is the worst enemy now. Worse than Soviet artillery. Worse than tanks. The cold kills you slowly and inevitably. Every morning, Hans wakes to find 1 or 2 men dead in their sleep, frozen despite being under every blanket the unit has. Weapons freeze solid. Bolt-action rifles won't cycle. Machine guns jam after 3 rounds. Tank engines won't start. The panzers that led the summer advance sit useless, frozen metal coffins. Food is scarce. Supply lines are cut by Soviet attacks. The men eat whatever they can scrounge: horse meat from dead animals, roots, bark. Some units resort to cannibalism, though this is never officially acknowledged. Disease spreads: typhus, dysentery, pneumonia. The field hospitals are overwhelmed. Wounded men are left to die because there's no way to evacuate them. Hans sees men lose fingers, toes, ears, noses to frostbite. He sees men go insane from the cold and stress, wandering into the snow never to return. He learns the third rule of the Eastern Front: survival is measured day by day. Planning for tomorrow is optimistic. Most won't see tomorrow. January 1942. For the first time, the Wehrmacht retreats. The unthinkable happens: German soldiers run from Soviet attacks. The retreat is chaotic and deadly. Units fall back in disorder, abandoning equipment they can't move. Heavy weapons are destroyed to prevent capture. Vehicles are set on fire. Hans's division retreats 100 kilometers in 2 weeks, fighting rearguard actions the entire way. Men freeze to death during the retreat. The wounded are left behind, there's no choice. They can't be carried and there are no vehicles. Hans sees wounded comrades propped against trees, given a pistol with 1 bullet, and left to choose between freezing slowly or ending it quickly. Most choose the bullet. Soviet forces pursue relentlessly. They show no mercy to stragglers. Captured Germans are often executed on the spot. Sometimes they're tortured first, payback for German atrocities during the advance. Hans and his comrades commit their own atrocities during the retreat. Villages suspected of harboring partisans are burned. Civilians are killed. It's not official policy, but nobody stops it. The retreat finally stabilizes in late February. Hitler orders no retreat and the line holds. But the damage is done. Hans and his surviving comrades know the truth now, they can be beaten. The Red Army isn't the incompetent rabble they were told about. And they're not going home anytime soon. The war that was supposed to end in 3 months has become a war of survival with no end in sight. March-May 1942. The spring thaw brings a temporary respite. Temperatures rise. The frozen hellscape becomes merely a muddy hellscape. Hans's division receives reinforcements, boys straight from training, terrified and unprepared. He's now a veteran at 23, one of the oldest survivors in his platoon. The new soldiers look at him with a mixture of respect and fear. He's gaunt, hollow-eyed, aged beyond his years. They ask him what it's like. He tells them, "You'll find out soon enough. Most of you will be dead within a month." It's not cruel. It's statistical reality. New German offensives are planned for summer 1942. Officers talk about cutting off Soviet oil supplies, capturing the Caucasus, winning the war by autumn. Hans doesn't believe them anymore. He's learned the fourth rule of the Eastern Front: officers lie. Not maliciously always, but systematically. They lie about objectives being achievable. They lie about losses being sustainable. They lie about victory being close. But Hans has no choice except to keep fighting. Desertion means execution. Defeatist talk means execution. Retreating without orders means execution. So he fights. And kills. And watches boys die. And waits for the bullet or shell that has his name on it. Because on the Eastern Front, it's not a question of if you die. Only when. And how. June-August 1942. Hans's division is transferred south, part of the massive German offensive towards Stalingrad and the Caucasus oil fields. The summer campaign initially goes well. German forces advance hundreds of kilometers. The Soviets seem to be retreating everywhere. Officers proclaim this is the final push that will win the war. Hans has heard this before. He doesn't believe it. But he keeps marching. The distances are still vast. The heat is now the enemy instead of cold. Temperatures reach 40 Celsius. Men die of heatstroke in their helmets. Water is scarce. Dysentery is epidemic. The steppe offers no shade, no relief. And Soviet resistance is stiffening. The Red Army isn't collapsing like in 1941. They're fighting organized delaying actions, falling back slowly, making Germans pay for every kilometer. By August, Hans's division approaches Stalingrad. The city sprawls along the Volga River, a massive industrial complex unlike anything the Germans have fought in before. Urban combat is about to begin. Hans has fought in fields, forests, villages. But street fighting in a city? That's different. Worse. Soldiers who've experienced urban combat in other theaters tell horror stories: every building a fortress, every room a potential death trap, enemy soldiers appearing from sewers and basements, fighting at point-blank range where artillery and tanks mean nothing. As Hans's unit enters Stalingrad's outskirts in September 1942, he knows, this will be bad. He doesn't know it will be the worst battle in human history. September-November 1942. Stalingrad becomes hell on earth. Hans fights street by street, building by building, room by room. Sometimes floor by floor in the same building. The combat is insane: Germans control the ground floor, Soviets the second floor, Germans the third. They fight vertically, tossing grenades down stairwells, shooting through floors, engaging enemies 10 meters away but unable to reach them. The city is rubble. Artillery and bombs have reduced entire districts to ruins. But ruins provide perfect defensive positions. Soviet soldiers hide in the wreckage, snipers pick off Germans from collapsed buildings, machine gunners fire from basements. Every advance costs lives. Hansa's company takes a factory complex. It requires 3 days of brutal fighting. 50 men die for one building. The next day, a Soviet counterattack retakes it. The 50 men died for nothing. This pattern repeats endlessly. Advance, retreat, advance again. The front line is sometimes a single wall in a ruined building. Combat is at grenade range. Hand-to-hand fighting is common. Hans kills Soviet soldiers with entrenching tools, bayonets, his bare hands. Life expectancy is measured in hours. Replacements arrive and die the same day. Sometimes the same hour. The entire division is slowly being consumed by this city. And still, the Soviets won't quit. November 19, 1942. Soviet Operation Uranus begins. Massive Soviet forces attack north and south of Stalingrad, targeting weak Romanian and Italian positions flanking the German salient. The Romanians collapse within hours. Soviet tank armies pour through the gaps. Within 4 days, they've linked up west of Stalingrad. Hansa's entire division, along with 250,000 other German and Axis troops, is surrounded. Cut off. Trapped. Officers initially say it's temporary. Luftwaffe Chief Göring promises to supply the pocket by air. They need 700 tons of supplies daily. The Luftwaffe delivers maybe 100 tons on good days, often much less. Soviet fighters shoot down transport planes. Winter weather grounds aircraft. Starvation begins immediately. Rations are cut. Then cut again. By December, soldiers receive 200 grams of bread per day. Maybe some horse meat. Sometimes nothing. Men begin to starve visibly. Uniforms hang loose on skeletal frames. The cold returns. -30°C. And this winter, there's no supply line bringing winter clothing. The men freeze in summer uniforms, burning furniture in ruined buildings for warmth. Ammunition runs low. Artillery units ration shells. Infantry ration bullets. The order is, no firing unless Soviets are within grenade range. Save ammunition for when they come. And the Soviets are tightening the noose, grinding down the pocket methodically. December 1942. Hans is starving. The 200 grams of bread per day isn't enough to sustain human life during physical exertion in extreme cold. Men are burning 4,000 calories daily but receiving maybe 800. The body begins to consume itself. Hans has lost 20 kilograms since November. His ribs are visible. His face is skeletal. Frostbite has claimed 2 toes and 3 fingers. Around him, men are dying of starvation in increasing numbers. They simply lie down and don't wake up. Field hospitals are packed with typhus and dysentery cases. There's no medicine. The wounded die of infections that would be treatable anywhere else. Amputations are performed without anesthesia because there is none. Soldiers scream during operations, then die anyway from shock or infection. Some men go mad. They wander into no man's land and are shot by Soviets. Some shoot themselves. Officers execute men for defeatism or attempting to surrender. Christmas 1942 is the darkest day of Hans's life. His company, once 150 men, is down to 12. They huddle in a frozen basement, sharing half a loaf of moldy bread. Someone starts singing, Silent Night. Others join in. Hans cries. He knows he's going to die here. They all know. The question is only when. And whether they'll starve first or freeze or be killed by Soviet attacks that resume daily. January 1943. The Stalingrad pocket is dying. Soviet forces have split it in two, then into smaller pockets. Hans's unit is down to 5 men. They occupy a ruined building in the factory district, surrounded on 3 sides by Soviets. They have 20 bullets between them. No food for 3 days. Water is melted snow. All 5 men have typhus. All have frostbite. All are starving. They know the end is coming. On January 31st, Soviet troops attack their position. Hans's group has no ammunition left. No strength to fight hand to hand. They raise their hands. Surrender. For the first time in Hans's war, he's relieved to be captured. At least captivity means potential survival. Death was certain if they kept fighting. Soviet soldiers take them prisoner. They're marched west with thousands of other German POWs. Most don't survive the march. They're too weak, too sick, too frozen. Men collapse and are left to die in the snow. Hans survives the march through a combination of youth, luck, and ruthless self-preservation. When another prisoner falls, Hans takes his coat. When they're given moldy bread, Hans fights other prisoners for an extra piece. He's become an animal. Survival is everything. Morality is a luxury for the living. Of the 91,000 Germans who surrendered at Stalingrad, only 6,000 would ever see Germany again. Hans will be one of them. But it will take 10 years in Soviet camps. February 1943 to 1953. Hans's war doesn't end at Stalingrad. It just changes form. Soviet POW camps are arguably worse than combat. At least in combat, death is quick. In the camps, it's slow. The first camp is near Voronezh. Thousands of German prisoners packed into barracks designed for hundreds. Disease is rampant: typhus, dysentery, tuberculosis. Men die daily. Bodies are stacked outside until spring when the ground thaws enough to bury them. Food is minimal: watery soup, a chunk of bread, sometimes kasha. Prisoners who can work receive more food. Those too sick to work receive starvation rations. It's systematic: work until you're too weak, then die. Hans works in a coal mine. 12 hours daily, deep underground, in dangerous conditions. Accidents are common. Cave-ins kill prisoners regularly. But Hans works. Because working means eating. Not working means death. The psychological toll is worse than the physical. News from Germany filters in. Total defeat. Cities in ruins. The regime that sent him here has collapsed. He fought for nothing. His comrades died for nothing. The suffering was meaningless. Some prisoners can't handle this. They give up. Stop eating. Stop working. Die within weeks. Hans refuses to give up. Not because he wants to live particularly, but because dying would mean the Soviets won. It's spite that keeps him alive. 1945 to 1953, the war ends. Hans is still in captivity. Stalin refuses to release German POWs quickly. They're used as slave labor to rebuild the Soviet Union they helped destroy. Hans is transferred to camps across the Soviet Union. Coal mines in the Donbass. Timber camps in Siberia. Construction projects in the Urals. The conditions vary but the fundamentals don't: work, starvation rations, disease, death. He watches thousands of prisoners die. Some from overwork. Some from disease. Some from despair. The camps are full of former Wehrmacht soldiers who thought they were superior to Slavs, now breaking rocks for those same Slavs. It's cosmic irony that doesn't escape Hans. He learns Russian. Becomes friendly with some guards, they're human too, conscripts doing a job. Some are sadists. Most are just tired men following orders. Like Hans was. The years blend together. 1946, 1947. 1948, Stalin dies in 1953. The new Soviet leadership begins releasing POWs as a goodwill gesture. Hansa's name comes up on a transport list. After 10 years, he's going home. Or what's left of it. Germany is divided, occupied, rebuilt. The country he left no longer exists. In October 1953, Hans crosses the border into West Germany. He's 34 years old but looks 50. Weighs 55 kilograms. Missing 7 fingers and toes to frostbite. Has permanent lung damage from the mines. But he's alive. Against all odds, he survived. 1953, Hans returns to Bavaria. His hometown is ruins and reconstruction. His family's house was destroyed by Allied bombing in 1944. His mother survived and remarried. His father died in 1948, heart attack. His younger brother died in Normandy in 1944. His sister is in East Germany, behind the Iron Curtain. The Germany Hans left in 1941 was Nazi Germany, confident, powerful, seemingly invincible. The Germany he returns to is defeated, divided, occupied, rebuilding. It's not his country anymore. And he's not the same person. He's broken physically and psychologically. He suffers from what we now call PTSD, constant nightmares, flashbacks, survivor's guilt. Why did he survive when millions died? Reintegration is difficult. People don't want to hear war stories. Germany is trying to forget and rebuild. Veterans are often viewed with suspicion. Were you a war criminal? Were you a Nazi true believer? Hans wasn't. He was just a soldier. But explaining that is complicated. He finds work in a factory. The routine helps. But he's haunted by memories. The faces of men he killed. Soviet soldiers. Civilians. The faces of comrades who died. The frozen corpses at Stalingrad. The prisoners who died in Soviet camps. Most veterans don't talk about the Eastern Front. It's too painful, too shameful, too complex. Was he a victim? A perpetrator? Both? He doesn't know anymore. 1953 to 2000, Hans lives quietly in Bavaria for 47 years after returning from captivity. He marries, has children, works, retires. He never talks about Russia. Never tells his children what he experienced. They know he was a soldier. They know he was a POW. But the details? The horror? The crimes he witnessed and committed? He takes it to his grave. This silence is common among Eastern Front veterans. The statistics tell the story they won't. Of 3.5 million German soldiers who invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, only 1 million survived the war without serious wounds or captivity. 1 million died. 1.5 million were wounded, captured, or went missing. Soviet military deaths, 8 to 10 million. Soviet civilian deaths, 15 to 20 million. Total Eastern Front deaths, approximately 30 million people. It was the deadliest conflict in human history. For German infantry like Hans, survival rates were appalling. Average life expectancy for German infantry on the Eastern Front in 1941 to 42, 6 months. For replacements in 1943 to 44, 6 weeks. At Stalingrad specifically, weeks to days. The Eastern Front consumed entire German divisions. Army Group Center alone lost over 500,000 men in summer 1944 during Operation Bag Ration, the deadliest German defeat of the war. For Hans, survival was a statistical miracle compounded by luck, youth, and ruthlessness. Most of his comrades weren't so lucky. Hans dies in 2000 at age 81. He's never prosecuted for war crimes. Never investigates for participation in atrocities. He was just an ordinary soldier, one of millions. But he witnessed and participated in war crimes. Burning villages. Executing partisans without trial. Shooting civilians. He followed orders. He didn't question them. Does that make him guilty? The question haunts veterans and historians. Wehrmacht soldiers committed extensive war crimes on the Eastern Front. Not just SS, regular army units participated in mass executions, anti-partisan operations that were really anti-civilian massacres, and enforcement of criminal orders. The clean Wehrmacht myth, the idea that regular German soldiers fought honorably while only SS committed atrocities, is false. Wehrmacht was deeply complicit. But prosecuting millions of veterans was impossible and politically unwise in Cold War West Germany. So men like Hans lived quietly, their crimes forgotten or forgiven or simply ignored. Hans himself never sorted out his moral responsibility. He was 22 when the war started. Indoctrinated by Nazi propaganda. Told Slavs were subhuman. Given criminal orders by superiors. Does youth excuse participation in genocide? Does following orders excuse war crimes? He didn't know. He didn't think about it much. Thinking about it meant confronting what he'd done. Easier to forget. Easier to focus on his own suffering, the cold, the starvation, the captivity. The victim narrative was easier than the perpetrator narrative. Even though he was both. The German experience on the Eastern Front offers brutal lessons that militaries still struggle to internalize. Logistics matter more than tactics. The Wehrmacht had brilliant tactics but couldn't supply its armies across vast distances. Tactical excellence is meaningless if soldiers have no ammunition or food. Ideology clouds judgment. Nazi racial ideology convinced German leaders that Slavs couldn't fight effectively. This fundamental misunderstanding doomed Barbarossa from the start. Never underestimate your enemy. The Germans assumed Soviet collapse in 3 months. The Soviets fought for 4 years and won decisively. Climate and geography are real constraints. Russia's size and winter defeated Napoleon. Hitler thought he could succeed through superior technology and tactics. He couldn't. Brutality creates resistance. German atrocities against Soviet civilians created partisans where none existed. Every burned village created dozens of new enemies. These lessons seem obvious in retrospect. But in 1941, German military leadership ignored them all. The result was the deadliest conflict in history and Germany's total defeat. For individual soldiers like Hans, the lessons were more personal. War is hell. Propaganda is lies. Orders can be criminal. Survival is random. And the trauma lasts forever. But these lessons died with the veterans. Each generation seems determined to learn them again the hard way. Understanding German infantrymen's experience requires comparing it to Soviet experience. German advantages 1941-42, better training, better tactics, better equipment, initial surprise. Better junior leadership, German NCOs and lieutenants were excellent. Soviet advantages, endless manpower reserves. Shorter supply lines. Fighting for survival, not conquest. Ability to trade space for time. Winter weather and terrain familiarity. By 1943, Soviet advantages were overwhelming. Industrial production outpaced Germany. T-34 tanks were superior to most German armor. Artillery was more numerous and better organized. Tactical doctrine improved dramatically. Manpower reserves seemed infinite while German reserves dried up. For German infantry, this meant, 1941, advance, win battles, take casualties but feel victorious. 1942, advance, win battles, take unsustainable casualties, feel uncertain. 1943, stalemate, lose battles, take catastrophic casualties, feel doomed. 1944-45, retreat, lose everything, take apocalyptic casualties, feel defeated. Soviet infantry experience was brutal throughout but with different trajectory. 1941, catastrophic defeats, enormous casualties, but survive. 1942, defensive victories, high casualties, but hold. 1943, offensive victories, high casualties, but winning. 1944–45, crushing advances, moderate casualties, total victory. Both sides suffered terribly. But Soviets were defending their homeland from genocidal invaders. Germans were invading to enslave and murder. Context matters. Hans never fully grasped this. He saw himself as a soldier doing his duty. Not as an invader participating in genocide. To be a German infantryman in Russia meant, to advance thousands of kilometers into an alien landscape that swallowed armies. To fight an enemy that wouldn't surrender, wouldn't quit, wouldn't break. To endure cold that froze you, heat that baked you, mud that drowned you. To starve slowly while officers lied about victory being close. To watch friends die from bullets, shells, disease, cold, starvation. To commit atrocities and witness worse. To lie to yourself that it was war, not genocide. To be surrounded and face certain death or captivity equally terrible. To survive against astronomical odds through luck and ruthlessness. To spend years in camps as punishment for your crimes, though you weren't tried. To return to a destroyed country that wanted to forget you existed. To carry trauma and guilt for the rest of your life without talking about it. To die decades later having never confronted what you did or what was done to you. For Hans Schmidt and millions like him, the Eastern Front was hell. They suffered terribly. But they were also perpetrators of genocide. They invaded a country to enslave and murder its people. Their suffering doesn't erase their crimes. Their crimes don't erase their suffering. Both are true simultaneously. History remembers the Eastern Front as the deadliest conflict in human history. 30 million dead. Thousands of cities and villages destroyed. An entire generation of Soviet and German men lost. For what? For Hitler's insane ideology. For Nazi dreams of racial empire. For nothing. Hans survived. But he never really came home. Part of him died in Russia. The frozen fields. The ruined cities. The prison camps. That's what it meant to be a German infantryman in Russia. Survival was death by another name.